Shanann and I just couldn't get along, and I didn't like the way she treated him when I was around them. Christopher always seemed anxious, and he when she needed something, I mean, he would run. He wouldn't walk, he would run, he would get it. He just always seemed to be right there.
We just want you to know we're behind you. Yes. And that we support you 100%. We know what she was like.
This is not the end of your story. She was a narcissist. You did nothing wrong. Chris Watts's mother pleads with him over the phone, clinging to the hope that the son she once knew can still be saved. But no matter how hard she tries, she can't make sense of the horror that's unfolded. On August 13th, 2018, Chris Watts killed his wife, 2 young daughters, and his unborn son in cold blood. A man who seemed to have everything, love, family, a future, turned into a murderer in the blink of an eye. This is the story of a family that was torn apart by one man's selfishness and the long road to uncovering the truth that he'd been hiding all along. This is not the end of your story. She was a narcissist. You did nothing wrong. Chris Watts's mother speaks these words with the kind of conviction that only a mother can. She can't quite grasp the truth of what's happened. Her son is behind bars for the brutal murder of his wife and children, and yet, in her eyes, he remains her son. We knew what she was like, she adds, as if trying to justify it all, as if that explanation could somehow make everything better. But no matter how hard she tries, the truth refuses to go away. This is not the end of your story. She was a narcissist. You did nothing wrong. His mother's voice rings with a mother's unwavering conviction, but there's no denying the truth. Her son is behind bars for the brutal murder of his wife and children. We knew what she was like, she adds, almost pleading with herself for understanding. But Chris's actions can't be justified. On August 13th, 2018, Chris Watts, the seemingly perfect husband and father, destroyed everything he once had in a single night. Shanann and their 2 young daughters, Bella and Cece, were taken from this world. His lies and excuses only revealed more of his darkness. This is the story of a man who tried to erase his past, only to destroy the people who loved him most. The sterile lights of Weld County Jail flicker above, their hum barely audible beneath the suffocating silence. Fluorescent bulbs cast a cold, clinical glow across the stark concrete walls. The air feels thick, pressing in from all sides, as if the building itself is trying to hold its breath. In a small, dimly lit room, Chris Watts sits alone, staring at the blank wall in front of him. His shoulders are hunched, and his eyes are distant, betraying a quiet desolation. A phone line buzzes, cutting through the stillness, the faint ringing echoing in the hollow space. The connection is made. The phone receiver clicks. His mother's voice, strained with emotion, breaks the silence, pulling Chris back from the abyss of his thoughts. Her words cut through the air, raw and desperate. What happened, Chris? What did you do? It's a question that no mother ever expects to ask. Yet here, in this moment, it's the only question that matters. She's reaching for something, anything. Clinging to a shred of hope, but it's all she has left. Her voice quivers, torn between disbelief and the kind of love that refuses to let go. You can hear it, the way her words crack, just enough to betray the fear she's tried to suppress. She wants answers. She deserves them. But will she get them? The words hang in the air between them, lingering in the space where silence had once reigned. Chris, however, is still. Too still. His eyes flicker slightly, but there's no spark of emotion behind them. No sign of the man who had once been a father, a husband. He takes a breath, slow, deliberate, before he answers her. But it's not the answer she wants. It's not even close. I don't know what you mean, Chris says, his voice flat, almost robotic. His words are devoid of warmth, of any kind of connection to the mother who raised him. It's a dismissal, a deflection. The words don't fit the gravity of the question. They fall like stones in the silence, not heavy enough to break it, but enough to fracture something within. The mother on the other end of the line, desperate, begins to unravel. She doesn't know it yet, but in this moment, this conversation, this connection, will mark the point of no return. There will be no going back from this. She can feel it in her bones. Her voice quivers again, softer now, as she asks, "What happened to my daughter-in-law? What happened to my grandbabies?" A shudder runs through her words. She can't even bring herself to say their names. The weight of it is too much. Chris doesn't answer at first. Instead, he inhales sharply, as though pulling in a breath he doesn't deserve to take. It's a shallow intake, not deep enough to settle his nerves. His gaze shifts down to his hands, where his fingers twitch restlessly, as if they know something his mind refuses to acknowledge. A long pause stretches out, agonizing. There's no sound, no movement, just the sound of Chris's breathing filling the space between them. It's unnatural, this silence. The kind that sits heavy in the chest, pressing down until the air is too thick to breathe. Finally, he speaks again, but his voice carries a tone that doesn't belong. I don't know what happened. It all went wrong," he says, the words trailing off, almost as if he's trying to convince himself. But they don't sound convincing at all. There's no anguish, no remorse, no genuine emotion. Only a hollow echo that reverberates through the line and into his mother's ears. She hears it, though, as much as she tries to ignore it. The emptiness in his words is unmistakable. Her heart stutters in her chest, trying to make sense of it, but it's impossible. The truth is there, buried just beneath the surface, but neither of them wants to admit it yet. His mother doesn't want to believe it, and Chris doesn't want to speak it. Instead, they dance around it, trapped in a silence that feels more deafening than any words could be. "Chris, please," she pleads, her voice breaking. It's a mother's last plea for understanding, a cry for something real, something human. "Tell me the truth. What happened to my family?" She's not asking for an explanation anymore. She's begging for the truth, whatever it might be. But Chris doesn't give it to her. Instead, he lets another pause linger, thick and suffocating, before speaking in that same cold tone. "It's not what you think, Mom. It wasn't what it looks like." His words are nonsensical, and his mother knows it. She can hear the disconnection in his voice, the lack of clarity, the absence of the man she raised. It's like listening to a stranger, and it terrifies her in a way she didn't expect. He's still her son, but he's also someone else now, someone unrecognizable. The silence stretches, a vast chasm between them. Her heart races in her chest. Her mind flails, desperate for some kind of anchor, but there is none. She grips the phone tighter, as though holding on will somehow pull the truth out of him, force him to say the words she needs to hear. But she knows, deep down, that there's no easy answer. "Chris, please," she whispers again, the words slipping out with a tremor. "Tell me what happened." For the first time, his voice cracks. Not in remorse, not in sorrow, but in something darker, more desperate. "I couldn't stop it, Mom. I couldn't stop it." The words fall into the silence, and the truth, that awful, unforgivable truth, shifts beneath the surface, nearly breaking free. But it doesn't. Not yet. Chris doesn't give her what she wants. He doesn't give her closure. He doesn't give her anything but more lies and half-truths wrapped in cold indifference. Her voice cracks, desperate, now almost pleading. "Chris, please, tell me the truth. Just tell me." The question remains unanswered. The truth hangs in the air, suspended, just beyond reach. This is not the end of your story, but at this moment, it feels like the end of everything. It's easy to believe in the illusion of perfection, especially when it's right in front of you. Shanann Watts' life was all over social media, shining with smiles, laughter, and what seemed like the perfect family. The videos she posted on Facebook painted a picture of a woman in control, a loving wife, an attentive mother, and a woman celebrating the milestones of life. Her daughters, Bella and Celeste, dance excitedly around her in the living room, their faces glowing with pure joy. They're spinning, laughing, their little feet bouncing across the floor, unaware that their world is about to break apart. In the background, there's Chris. He stands there, stiff, almost disconnected from the warmth of the moment. His smile is small, forced, and for just a moment, he seems like a stranger in his own home. It's a fleeting second, but it speaks volumes. In those few seconds, the cracks in the perfect picture begin to show. This is the life that the world saw, the life that people envied. But behind the glossy images and cheerful posts, there was a deeper story, one that no one could see. Chris's mother recalls Shanann with a sigh, almost as if the words are too hard to say aloud. She was controlling, a narcissist, she says in that quiet, haunting way that only mothers can. Chris listens, not denying, not agreeing fully, just accepting the words as they fall into the silence. His lack of reaction speaks louder than anything he could say. The picture of Shanann, her smile wide and eyes bright, is now tainted with a new understanding. The once vibrant posts are no longer the evidence of a perfect family. The pieces of a broken house are starting to come into focus. Was the smile Chris wore in that video real? Or was it just another mask? One he wore to keep up appearances, to make the world believe the lies he himself had come to believe? From the outside, they looked like the American dream. But what if that dream was a glass house, ready to shatter? The tension in the air thickens. What does it take for a seemingly perfect family to fall apart? How did things get this far? The truth, as it always does, lies hidden just beneath the surface, but Chris's mother's words give a glimpse. Her view of Shanann, once a loving daughter-in-law, now appears sharply different. She paints a picture of control and manipulation, of a woman who kept everything tightly wound in her grip. But was it really just that? Was Shanann simply a woman who wanted control, or was something darker at play? The narrative shifts, and the picture begins to form in the minds of the viewers. The life that seemed perfect now seems fragile, like the fragile glass of a shattered dream. The pieces start to fall into place as we realize that, from the outside, everything was pristine, but inside, the foundation was crumbling. Chris's quiet agreement to his mother's claim that Shanann was controlling speaks volumes. It suggests a deeper truth about the tension in their marriage. What was once a bond between them now feels more like a slow, unraveling thread destined to break. Chris's mother's voice, still echoing in the dark of the jail call. She did nothing but control you. Those words hang in the air, their weight heavy in the silence. How much of what they saw was real? How much of it was a performance, a facade built to hide the cracks in a family that was falling apart? The phone rings again in the cold, sterile room. Chris picks up the receiver slowly, his fingers gripping it tighter as if it's the only thing anchoring him at this moment. On the other end, his mother's voice trembles, filled with raw emotion. "Do you feel any remorse, Chris?" She asks, her voice breaking. She wants to hear something, anything, that shows he understands what he's done. But her son's response is flat, emotionless. "I don't know," Chris says, his voice completely devoid of the pain his mother expects to hear. The words are empty, hanging in the air like a hollow echo. It's not the answer she needs. It's not the answer anyone should hear after something so tragic, yet it's the only one she gets. His mother's grip on the phone tightens. She can't understand. She wants to believe that, somewhere deep down, Chris feels the weight of his actions, the devastation he's caused, the lives he's destroyed. But he doesn't feel it. His tone is distant, detached, as though the gravity of what he's done hasn't even touched him. She listens, her heart sinking further with every word he says, but there's nothing to grab onto. No emotion, no apology, just a cold, disaffected voice. His mother's face twisted with grief. Her eyes are red and swollen, and the tears that have been building up for days now stream down her face, silent and endless. She's helpless, not just because she doesn't know where her daughter-in-law and grandchildren are, but because the person she's speaking to no longer feels like her son. She's asking him questions she never imagined she would have to ask. "What happened, Chris? Why didn't you stop?" She's desperate now, the tears mixing with frustration, trying to reach him in a way that he's no longer reachable. "How could you do this? How could you do this to your own family?" But Chris remains distant. His eyes stare blankly ahead, avoiding the rawness of his mother's pain. "I don't know," he mutters again. The same words, the same emptiness. His response feels more like a dismissal than an answer, like he's refusing to acknowledge the horror he's caused. Chris's face, emotionless, staring into the distance. His mother, broken, her face crumpled with the weight of grief. Between them, an unspoken distance widens. On one side, the numbness of a son who's detached himself from the reality of his actions. On the other, a mother who can't make sense of how she's gotten to this point. In the background, the faint sound of Shanann's laughter from home videos plays softly. It's a sharp contrast to the tension in the room, a reminder of what's been lost. The sound of Bella and Cece laughing, dancing around their mother, Those are the moments now gone. And yet, they haunt the room, as if they're reminding both of them of what could have been. Chris's mother presses him again, her voice breaking with each word. "Tell me the truth, Chris," she pleads. "Just tell me what happened. I can't keep going on like this, not knowing, not understanding." She's begging now. She's not just asking for answers. She's asking for her son back. The son who would have held her, who would have shared the weight of their family's struggles. But that son seems so far away. Chris's face remains unchanged, but there's a momentary flicker, something fleeting that almost seems like guilt, but it disappears just as quickly as it comes. "It wasn't my fault," he says, the words cold and matter-of-fact. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't falter. He simply states it, and it hangs there in the silence between them, heavy and final. His mother's face tightens, as though the words physically hurt. Her lips tremble, but no more words come. She doesn't know what else to say. There's nothing she can say. The answer she's been searching for is still out of reach, buried behind that impenetrable wall of indifference. She can't make sense of it. How the man she raised, the man who once smiled with his family, could now be sitting in a jail cell, so detached, so cold. Chris's mother's voice quivers as she asks, "Why, Chris? Why couldn't you stop?" Her voice cracks as she pleads for something, anything. But Chris doesn't respond. His eyes remain fixed in the same empty stare. He shut her out. He shut the world out. The camera zooms in on his face, and for a brief moment, there's a flicker of something behind his eyes, something that might be remorse, something that might be guilt. But just as quickly, it vanishes. He says, "It wasn't my fault," again, as if the words have lost all meaning. They're a mantra now, a defense, a way to protect himself from the truth he refuses to face. His mother is left on the other end of the line, lost in a sea of confusion, sorrow, and disbelief. She's reached the point where the answers no longer matter. The son she once knew is gone, replaced by a man who refuses to acknowledge the truth. The phone call ends, leaving the silence to settle over them both. Chris, still locked in his own mind, and his mother, still drowning in her grief. The truth remains buried, and neither of them knows how to dig it out. Neither of them knows how to move forward. But the silence doesn't last forever. The questions linger. What really happened? And how did it all go so terribly wrong? Let's go back to the beginning before Chris started to answer calls behind bars. On August 13th, 2018, and the clock strikes 2 a.m., the house is quiet. The sound of tires rolling on asphalt echoes in the early morning stillness as Shanann drives home after a business trip. She's been away for just a few days, but it's been long enough to miss her family. As the garage door opens, the soft hum of the house lights flicker to life. She steps out of her car, luggage in hand, and makes her way into the home. It's a simple scene, one that could have easily been forgotten by time. But it's a moment that will be forever etched in the minds of those who knew Shanann, a moment before everything changed. Inside, the house is still. No laughter, no movement, just the quiet hum of a home that once echoed with life. Bella and Cece, her two young daughters, are asleep in their beds, unaware of what's to come. Chris Watts, Shanann's husband, is already in bed. He's awake, waiting for her return. But the warmth that should have filled the house with their reunion is absent. No excited greetings. No rush to embrace her after a few days away. Instead, there's only the silence. The morning comes quickly, and the routine of life starts. But something isn't right. Neighbors' security cameras pick up an unusual sight. The camera feed shows Chris backing his truck into the driveway, the familiar sound of his engine cutting through the crisp morning air. It's a simple action, one that should have been normal, but it's not. The time, just after 5 a.m., is strange, unsettling even. There's no sign of Shanann, no indication that she's up, no rush of activity. The house remains quiet, too quiet. At 9 a.m., Nicole Atkinson, Shanann's close friend, notices something odd. Shanann had a doctor's appointment scheduled, but she didn't show up. Nicole calls, and when there's no answer, a growing sense of unease starts to settle in. She tries again, still nothing. That's when she knows. Something's wrong. This isn't like Shanann. She would never just miss an appointment without saying something. Nicole's worry grows with every unanswered call. With no word from Shanann, and with her friend's intuition ringing in her ears, Nicole drives to Shanann's house. When she arrives, the front door is locked, and the house looks undisturbed. Shanann's car is still parked in the driveway. Her purse and medication are still there. There's no sign of life. The house feels like a time capsule, frozen in a moment where nothing has moved. But the reality is different. It's too quiet. There's something deeply unsettling about the way things are left behind, untouched, like time itself stopped. Nicole calls police. The welfare check begins, and within moments, law enforcement arrives on the scene. Body cam footage from the officers shows them entering the house, their faces filled with confusion and concern. They find the same unsettling scene. Shanann's purse, her car, her medication, all untouched. Nothing seems out of place, except the absence of its owner. It's eerie, the way everything has been left behind, as though Shanann just vanished into thin air. The officers move cautiously through the house, checking each room, looking for any sign of distress, but there's nothing. No sign of a struggle, no broken windows, just emptiness. As the investigation continues, the tension grows. No one knows. No one knows where Shanann is, and the questions are mounting. Had she left on her own? Had something happened to her? And if something had happened, why was everything left behind? How could she just vanish, leaving everything behind like that? At 11:30 a.m., Chris Watts is questioned. The police approach him, and he answers the door, oddly calm, like nothing's out of the ordinary. When asked where Shanann is, he says, "She just left." The words fall flat, the same detachment that had been evident in the jail call earlier now resurfacing. The officer's eyes narrow. There's something wrong about the way he says it. It's too casual, too offhand, considering the gravity of the situation. His response doesn't match the scene, doesn't match the worry that everyone else is feeling. In less than 24 hours, anticipation turned to absence. Hope turned to suspicion. The officers are left with more questions than answers. Chris's calm demeanor stands in stark contrast to the urgency of the situation. His casual response only raises more doubts. Was Shanann in trouble? Or was this something else, something darker? The truth is slipping further away, hidden behind the man who should have known it all along. And with each passing minute, the mystery deepens. As the camera pulls away from Chris's face, standing in the doorway, it's clear the calmness he exudes is a mask. Behind his eyes lies something deeper, something that won't come to light until much later. The officers don't know it yet, but their investigation is about to take them to a place they never imagined. Shanann's disappearance is not as simple as it seems. The house, once filled with life and laughter, now stands frozen in time. A family's dream is crumbling piece by piece. The questions, the uncertainty, the confusion, all of it sits heavily in the air. Everyone is waiting for the truth to be revealed, but no one knows just how much darker that truth will become. It was a moment that should have been filled with raw emotion. A father, desperate to find his wife and children, pleading with the world to help bring them home. Instead, it was cold, mechanical. The media footage shows Chris Watts standing before the camera, his face stiff and unreadable. His voice is flat, rehearsed, as he speaks about his missing family, his wife Shanann and their two young daughters, Bella and Cece. He talks about how much he loves them, how much he misses them, but there's nothing in his eyes. No tears, no real anguish. Just the words, hollow and distant, leaving the air like echoes of a man who knows more than he's letting on. As Chris speaks, neighbors watch from their windows, some murmuring among themselves. His odd behavior hasn't gone unnoticed. There's a sense that something isn't quite right, that the man standing in front of the cameras is not the same man they've seen living in the house down the street for years. They whisper about his coldness, the way he seems detached, almost robotic, like he's going through the motions of what he's supposed to do, not what he feels. There's something unsettling in the way he stands. His posture is stiff, unnatural, and when he looks into the camera, his eyes don't seem to reflect the weight of the situation. They're flat, empty. His body language says one thing, but his words say another. The more people watch, the more they sense that the story Chris is telling doesn't quite add up. The story of a loving father and husband is slipping away, replaced by something darker. The investigators have already begun their work, and soon, the cracks in Chris's facade will become too wide to ignore. Cadaver dogs are brought in to search the house and the surrounding area, but it's not just for show. They alert in areas that seem wrong. Police note the inconsistencies in Chris's story. His timeline doesn't add up. The way he talks about Shanann's disappearance doesn't fit with the scene they've found. There's a growing unease in the air as they begin to question him more closely. The story he's been telling, the one that made him seem like a grieving husband, is starting to fall apart, piece by piece. And then the questions get tougher. Chris was invited for a polygraph test, a place where truth is meant to come out. Chris sits down for a polygraph test, and this time, the tension is palpable. Investigators begin asking direct questions. Did you kill your wife? Did you harm your children? The questions are sharp, cutting through the thick air. And Chris answers. But this time, his answers are not as confident. He stumbles over his words, his body stiffening under the pressure. The polygraph test records every minute shift in his body, every twitch, every breath. It doesn't lie, and the results are clear. Chris fails. His body betrays him. The numbers don't lie. The machine shows a drastic response to the questions, a stark difference between his calm exterior and the deep unease hidden beneath. His lies are written all over his body, his heart rate, and the sweat forming on his brow. He's not the calm, grieving husband he's tried to present himself as. He's unraveling. The mask of innocence slipped, and behind it was a man unraveling. As the polygraph results come in, the investigators know they have him cornered. There's no more room for lies, no more space to hide behind carefully rehearsed words. The interrogator leans in, his voice calm but unyielding. There's only one outcome here, Chris. The truth. The words are simple, but they hang in the air like a heavy weight. There's no escaping it now. Chris knows what's coming. He knows the walls are closing in, that the truth is slipping out of his grasp. And yet, he says nothing. His face remains unreadable, but in his eyes, there's a flicker, something that wasn't there before. It's not guilt, not exactly, but it's a shift. For the first time, maybe, the reality of what he's done is settling in. But even then, he doesn't give in. He holds on to the last thread of his facade, the last shred of the lie. The investigators know they're not going to get the full truth right now, but they also know this. The cracks are too big to hide. The camera lingers on Chris's face, watching as the last moments of his false narrative crumble. The man who once appeared to have it all, perfect family, perfect life, is now just a man under pressure, exposed in ways he never expected. The lies that have kept him shielded for so long are beginning to dissolve, and what's left is the stark reality of who he really is. The question remains, will he continue to deny it? Or will the truth finally come pouring out, as inevitable as the rising tide? The room is cold. Chris Watts sits there, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his eyes on the table in front of him. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights above fills the silence. It's a moment of tension, a waiting game between him and the detectives. They've pushed him, they've broken through his layers of lies, and now, he's at the edge. He knows what's coming. The truth, that truth, will not stay buried for much longer. Finally, Chris speaks. The words come slowly, as if he's trying to weigh each one before he lets them leave his lips. I killed Shanann, he says, the words coming out with no real emotion, as if they belong to someone else. There's no pleading, no remorse in his voice. It's flat, a confession that's too controlled. But there's more to it. More lies hiding in the cracks. He quickly adds, she strangled the kids. I killed her in a rage. The detectives listen, their eyes never leaving him. They've heard this story before, this twisted version of the truth, but they know it doesn't fit. It's a desperate attempt to twist the narrative, to shift the blame from himself to his wife. It's easier for him to say she killed the children, to claim that he acted in a fit of rage. It's easier to make her the villain, to put the blame on the woman who is no longer there to defend herself. But the lie is too big, and the detectives can see right through it. They don't speak immediately. The silence hangs heavy between them, but they know this isn't the truth. They know it's a desperate attempt to cover up the depths of what he's done. A desperate lie, shifting blame onto the very woman he silenced. Back to the present, to the jail call that Chris had with his mother. Her voice comes through the phone, her words full of sorrow, tinged with the familiar concern only a mother can feel. I knew she pushed you too far, she says softly, the words barely a whisper. Chris doesn't respond at first. He's silent, as if he's trying to process what she's just said. There's a long pause, And then he whispers, "Yeah." It's a moment that stands out, not because of the words, but because of what's not said. His agreement, his quiet acceptance of his mother's words, tells a story of its own. The truth, the full truth, is still locked away behind that cold wall. But the cracks are starting to show. Chris may not say it outright, but his response here is a reflection of the twisted justification he's clinging to. His mother's words, though painful, have become the shield he's holding on to. She, too, wants to believe that Shanann was the cause, that it was her fault. But deep down, Chris knows better. And his mother must feel the same doubt in her heart, even if she doesn't want to acknowledge it. The camera lingers on Chris's face for a moment, his expression unchanged, distant. It's a look that says everything and nothing at once. He's trapped in his own web of lies. But it's clear that he's beginning to lose control of the story he's been trying to spin. The truth, as messy and brutal as it is starting to leak out. His mother, too, is starting to see the cracks, though she's not ready to fully accept them. In the past, Chris's confession is being pieced together. His version of the events, the one he's tried to sell for so long, is beginning to unravel. The words spill from his lips, but they don't carry the weight they once did. The detectives have the evidence, and it's damning. The prosecutor stands at the front of the room, their face stoic but filled with the knowledge that the truth will soon come to light. "We have the evidence," the prosecutor announces, their voice clear and unwavering. And it does not match his words. There's no more denial, no more confidence. The walls are closing in on him. The story he's been trying to tell is no longer his to control. The evidence they have, evidence that will break his entire defense apart, is coming. It's already in their hands. And there's nothing he can do to stop it. The prosecutor's words echo in the silence. "We have the evidence." And it does not match his words. The truth is out there, and now the clock is ticking. Chris's lies have brought him to this point, and the reality of what he's done is about to come crashing down. But even with the evidence, the questions remain. What made him do it? And how much longer can he keep lying? In the early hours of August 13th, 2018, Shanann was killed in the bedroom she once shared with Chris. There, in the place where they had built their lives together, Chris strangled her. It was not a moment of passion, not a sudden outburst of anger. This was cold. This was calculated. There was no fight, no desperate struggle. Shanann's life was snuffed out in silence, leaving only the lingering echoes of a life that would soon be erased. Bella and Cece, the two young girls, asleep in their beds, unaware of the nightmare that was unfolding just a few feet away. As the clock ticked on, the horrors of the night crept closer. At some point, they woke up. The exact moment remains a question, but what happened next is undeniable. They were terrified. They saw their mother, lifeless. They felt the weight of fear and confusion as their world was torn apart. Chris turned on them next. Cece was smothered first, her small body struggling for air as she was held down by the very man who should have protected her. Bella, the older of the two, fought back with everything she had. The terror in her eyes must have been overwhelming as she tried to escape, to save herself and her sister. She bit her tongue in the struggle, a physical sign of her fight to live. And in that moment, she whispered her final words to the man who had once been her father. "Daddy, no." The words echo in the silence, their weight heavy in the air. "Daddy, no." Bella's plea for mercy, for protection, for the love she thought she had. But Chris didn't stop. He smothered her, just as he had smothered Cece. And in those final moments, her voice was silenced, her life erased from this world. After the unimaginable had occurred, he proceeded to dispose of their bodies. Shanann was buried in a shallow grave, her body hidden from the world in a cold, dark plot of land, far from the home where she had once smiled and laughed with her children. Her life, too, was erased in a single act of violence. And for the children, Bella and Cece, there was no grave, no peaceful resting place. Instead, they were discarded, forced into oil tanks, their tiny bodies crammed into metal containers. Their lives ended with a finality that no one could comprehend. The place where they once lived, loved, and played became the scene of their end, their lives discarded as if they meant nothing. The horror of it all is not just in the violence. It's in the way Chris approached it. This wasn't a moment of rage. This wasn't a fit of anger. This was erasure. A man trying to rewrite his life, to destroy the old in order to create something new. The children, his family, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was his escape, his desire to start fresh, to live the life he had imagined for himself with Nicole Kessinger, his mistress. The price he was willing to pay was more than any of them could have ever imagined. This was not rage. This was erasure. A man trying to make his new life by destroying the old. The weight of this truth is undeniable. Chris had carefully planned the killings, executed them with chilling precision, and then disposed of the bodies as though they were nothing more than trash. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a carefully constructed plan, a plan that was executed in cold blood. But there's something even more chilling beneath the surface. For all the coldness that filled Chris's actions, there was something darker, something more insidious. It wasn't just the act itself, but the way he continued to lie, the way he continued to deny, even as the truth was staring him in the face. He wanted to believe that he was justified, that what he did was the only way out. And for him, in that moment, maybe it was. But for everyone else, his wife, his children, his mother, the entire world, what he did was nothing short of evil. Chris's mother, her voice softly whispering through the phone call, "You did nothing wrong." Her words are quiet, barely audible, but they cut through the air like a knife. She's clinging to something, still trying to protect him, still trying to hold on to the image of the son she thought she knew. But at this moment, her words carry no weight. They offer no comfort. Because deep down, she knows. She must know. What he did was wrong. What he did cannot be excused. And yet, her voice still lingers, an echo of the mother's love that refuses to let go, even in the face of unspeakable horror. But in that silence, the truth lingers. Chris may have tried to erase his family, but their voices, their memories, would never be silenced. Not now. Not ever. And no matter how many lies he tells, no matter how many times he denies it, the truth will always remain. He destroyed everything. And there is no going back. The courtroom was filled with the heavy weight of silence as Chris Watts stood before the judge, his expression unreadable, his body stiff and emotionless. It was a moment that should have been filled with tension, with anticipation, but instead, there was an eerie calmness. Chris had already decided his fate. He would plead guilty to avoid the death penalty. His decision wasn't one made out of remorse or regret, but rather a cold calculation. By pleading guilty, he could avoid the lethal injection, but in doing so, he also spared the world from hearing the full details of his actions. As Chris made his plea, Shanann's family, her parents, her brother, and others who had loved her, sat in the courtroom, their faces a mix of disbelief and quiet devastation. They had waited for this moment, the moment where justice would finally be served, but there was no trial, no courtroom drama, no dramatic revelations. Just a man who had confessed to his crimes, but offered no real explanation. The family sat, broken, their grief palpable in the cold, sterile space of the courtroom. The absence of a trial left them with more questions than answers. Why had Chris done this? What had driven him to murder the woman he had promised to love and protect? And what about the children? What did they see in their final moments? Those questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the gavel came down on Chris's fate. When it was time for Shanann's family to speak, they rose to their feet, their voices trembling with the weight of their grief and anger. Shanann's father, Frank Rzusek, spoke first, his voice filled with sorrow and outrage. He condemned Chris's actions, his lies, and his complete disregard for the lives he had taken. "You stole everything from us," Frank said, his voice breaking. "You took our daughter, our grandchildren, and you have the audacity to sit there and pretend like none of it matters. You didn't just take their lives, you destroyed everything." Shanann's mother, Sandra Rzusek, was next. Her pain was raw, her words choked with emotion. She spoke of her daughter, of Shanann's kindness, her love, and the joy she brought into the world. "Shanann didn't deserve this," Sandra said, her voice shaking. "None of them did. They trusted you, and you betrayed them in the most unforgivable way. You are a coward." The Rzusek's words were not just a condemnation of Chris's actions. They were a plea for dignity. Dignity for Shanann, for Bella, for Cece, and for their unborn child, Nico. They wanted the world to remember them as they were, not as victims, but as people who were loved and who had so much left to give. They wanted justice, but more than that, they wanted their family's story to be told with respect, not reduced to sensational headlines and cheap media coverage. Justice without a trial is a sentence without answers. The gavel struck, the sound echoing through the courtroom, but there was no satisfaction in it. No closure. No peace. Chris Watts had been sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He would never leave prison. But the weight of that sentence didn't bring the Narcissistic peace. It didn't bring Shanann back, or the children, or the life they had all lost. The emptiness that filled the courtroom after the sentencing was palpable. There was no victory here, only a sense of finality that did nothing to ease the pain. Chris's fate had been sealed, but for Shanann's family, the questions remained. How could a man who once seemed so normal, so full of promise, turn into someone capable of such horrific acts? What had driven him to murder his own family? And why did he do it in such a calculated, cold manner? The judge's voice had barely faded when the courtroom doors closed behind Chris. His life, once full of promise and potential, was now nothing more than a series of grim decisions that would echo through the halls of prison for the rest of his life. As the room emptied, the weight of the decision settled in. The Narcissists had their answers, but they were unsatisfying. Chris had confessed, but he had not given them the truth they never expected. In the days and weeks following the murders, as the media descended on the tragedy, they fought against something more insidious than grief itself. The sensationalism that surrounded their daughter's death, the exploitation of her story, and the constant intrusion into their mourning. The headlines came fast. They painted Chris Watts as a monster, but they also portrayed Shanann as a victim, and while that was true, it often felt as though the narrative around her death overshadowed everything else. The Narcissists couldn't escape the constant waves of coverage. Television broadcasts, online articles, and social media posts flooded the world with the details of a tragedy that didn't belong to the public, but rather to them, the ones who had loved her, who had shared her life. They spoke out, not to silence the world, but to make sure that Shanann's memory was not drowned out in the noise. They wanted people to know the woman she had been before she became a tragic headline. Shanann wasn't just a victim in a tragic murder story. She was a mother, a wife, a daughter, and a sister. She had dreams. She had aspirations. She had a future that was ripped away, and her family was determined to make sure the world saw that side of her. They didn't want the story of her death to be the only thing people remembered. The Narcissist's grief wasn't just the pain of losing their daughter. It was the sorrow of seeing her life reduced to nothing but a tragic story. The media turned her death into a spectacle. The news outlets, eager for a story with endless twists and turns, painted Chris Watts as a monster, but they also painted Shanann as a victim, stripping away the fullness of who she had been. Frank Narcissist, Shanann's father, found himself forced into the spotlight. He spoke out repeatedly, condemning the media's handling of his daughter's death, pushing back against the portrayal of her life and legacy. He wanted the world to know that Shanann was more than just a victim. She was a real person, someone with dreams, ambitions, and a love for life that was taken too soon. For them, justice was never enough. They carry the weight of memory every day. The media's sensationalism may have settled down, but the Narcissist's fight wasn't over. They continued to preserve Shanann's memory by speaking out against the way her story was told. Their voices became a constant reminder that Shanann was more than a news story. They knew that the only way to keep her alive was to remind the world of who she really was. But as they fought to honor her legacy, another person was locked away in a prison cell, reflecting on what he had done. Chris Watts, the man who had taken everything from them, was now behind bars. But even there, in the isolation of his cell, he couldn't let go of the faces of the people he destroyed. While Chris was in prison, the cold, concrete walls of his cell loom around him as he sits in solitude, the weight of his actions pressing in on him. He's not the same man he once was. He's broken, in his own way, but there's something about the way he holds on to pictures of his victims. Shanann, Bella, Cece, and even Nico's scan. Their faces are still present in his life, even behind bars. He keeps them with him, tucked away in his prison cell, as though they're the last remnants of the life he destroyed. He writes letters, long and repetitive, almost as if trying to make sense of what he's done. The words are haunting, full of remorse and justification, but still lacking in true responsibility. His letters are his only escape, his only way to continue to exist in a world that has completely rejected him. Yet, even in his confinement, even in the silence of his prison cell, he clings to the faces of the people he murdered, his family, the family he erased. Why does he still hold on to the faces he destroyed? The answer is somewhere deep inside him, but will we never know? The Narcissists continue to fight for their daughter's memory, but as long as Chris holds onto their faces, the full weight of their grief remains unfinished. Inside Dodge Correctional Institution, Chris Watts is a man who has been stripped of everything. The world outside may have moved on, but inside his cell, time feels as though it's frozen. Dodge Correctional Institution is now his home, the walls of the prison enclosing him in a solitary, suffocating existence. He is locked away for the rest of his life, the weight of his actions carrying him through every day, every hour. The world may have forgotten him, but within the walls of this place, his presence still lingers. In the beginning, Chris's days are quiet. He is isolated from the general population, his movements restricted. Reports of his isolated existence spread, confirming that he is kept in a single cell, separated from the rest of the prison's inhabitants. His time is spent in silence, his mind left to wander through the endless hours of solitude. But that silence is occasionally broken. Despite his attempts to stay invisible, Chris Watts becomes a figure of curiosity. Fan letters begin arriving for him. Letters from strangers who find themselves fascinated by his story. It's unsettling, the way people outside of his crimes see him as some kind of twisted figure to be admired, even in prison. They send him cards, ask for his thoughts on what happened, and some even express their sympathy for his situation. These letters are strange, eerie even, as if Chris, a man who took everything from his own family, has somehow found himself a twisted kind of celebrity, even in the depths of his confinement. He reads them, the words penned by strangers who don't know him, who don't understand what he's truly capable of. Some of the letters are supportive, filled with sympathy for his family troubles, while others are more pointed, trying to understand what drove him to do what he did. But for Chris, the fascination only serves as a reminder that the world, even behind the bars of a prison cell, can't seem to look away from him. They cannot look away from the destruction he caused. They want to know him, understand him, maybe even forgive him. But the truth remains elusive. And Chris? He's silent. Even behind steel doors, fascination follows him. But the real story isn't his. It's theirs. While the world may be fascinated with the killer Chris Watts has become, the real story remains with those he left behind. The Narcissist, the family that loved Shanann, Bella, Cece, and little Nico. It's their pain, their grief, their fight for justice, and for Shanann's legacy that truly matters. Chris's fascination with himself, his pathetic attempts to cling to his image, pale in comparison to the lives that were truly destroyed by his actions. In his cell, surrounded by the cold, unfeeling walls of Dodge Correctional, Chris might reflect on what he's lost, but does he ever truly think about what he's taken from others? Does he realize that the family he destroyed will never see closure? That the pain they carry every single day is the consequence of his cold-hearted decision? He may be isolated from the world now, but the weight of his crimes will never truly leave him. It's not the fascination of strangers, not the letters that arrive every week, that will haunt him. It's the faces of those he murdered, the faces of Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico, that will linger in his mind, forever. They are the ghosts that will never let him rest. The screen fades to a home video of Shanann, her smile bright, her laughter infectious as she holds Bella and Cece in her arms. In this moment, before it all unraveled, she was just a mother, a wife, full of love and life. The camera zooms in on her face as she looks directly at the lens, a look of pure joy in her eyes. This was the woman Chris took from the world, the woman whose life he stole in the most brutal way imaginable. In the darkness, the question hangs in the air. What does it take to truly face the truth? And Chris? Is he ready to face it? Or will he continue hiding behind the cage of his own lies? The phone rings again. Inside the cold walls of his prison cell, Chris Watts picks up the receiver, his hands shaking slightly. The connection is made, and his mother's voice crackles through the line, familiar but distant. as if reaching him from another world. "This is not the end of your story," she says softly. Her words are filled with a mix of hope, regret, and desperation. A mother's plea for her son to find some kind of redemption, some kind of peace. But there's no response. Chris doesn't say anything. The silence stretches long between them, thick and suffocating. His mother's words hang in the air, unresolved, unanswered. She wants him to hear her. She wants him to understand that this isn't just about the end. It's about what comes next. But Chris, trapped behind the steel walls of Dodge Correctional, is a man who can't face the truth. His own story, the one he crafted to justify his actions, is crumbling. And no matter how many times his mother tells him it's not the end, he can't seem to grasp that there's more to be faced. The silence on the other end of the phone isn't just the absence of words. It's the absence of remorse, of responsibility, of anything that might allow for healing. Chris's emotional distance has been clear from the start, but it's in moments like this, when his mother's voice reaches out to him, that the depth of his isolation becomes most evident. She's grasping for something she can't quite reach, his admission, his understanding, his remorse, but it's not coming. She knows it. He knows it. The silence between them is deafening. This is the story of betrayal, of a man who once stood at the center of a family, only to shatter everything he had with one cold act of violence. Chris Watts was not just a husband and father. He was a man who chose to erase everything in his life that no longer suited him. Shanann, the woman he married, the children he fathered. None of it mattered in the end. They were discarded as if they were nothing. His actions were a betrayal of the most fundamental trust. He had been loved, trusted, and supported, but in the end, he betrayed all of it. The trust between husband and wife, parent and child, is one of the most sacred bonds in human life. Yet, Chris destroyed that bond in the most horrific way possible. His betrayal wasn't just a violation of his marriage or his family. It was a betrayal of the idea that anyone, even someone who had everything, could reach a breaking point so dark that they would choose to destroy everything around them. Shanann and her children were not just victims of a man's violence. They were the victims of a man who had been willing to sacrifice them for the sake of his own desires, for the sake of his own escape. And as for the victims themselves, Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico, their voices refused to be silenced. Even though their lives were stolen in an instant, the memory of who they were continues to echo. Shanann's family has worked tirelessly to preserve her memory, to remind the world that she was more than just the victim of a murder. She was a mother, a wife, a woman who had dreams and a future that was stolen away. Bella and Cece were children who never had the chance to grow up, their futures erased before they had even begun. And Nico, an unborn child, whose life was ended before he could ever take his first breath. The victims' voices will always speak louder than the silence Chris now lives in. They are not just part of a tragic story. They are part of a story that continues to resonate with everyone who remembers them. In the quiet of a jail cell, the silence of answers speaks louder than any confession. Chris Watts may be behind bars, but his silence is deafening. His answers, his lies, and his justifications will never fill the void left by the family he destroyed. The finality of his actions remains, and the world will always remember those he erased from it.